Listen, we all know where we're going with this. Alright. First of all, get out of here, light. Anyways, sorry for the close-up. Anyways, thank you all very much for, well, first of all, for being with the channel this long. Second of all, for 10,000 views, which, holy crap, I wasn't expecting. But you're probably thinking, hey, what's with the title? What did you get recently? Well, I'm excited to announce that I recently acquired a hidden masterpiece in the world of gaming. I'm of course talking about something that I teased a little bit at the beginning of this very stream. In commemoration of reaching 10,000 views, I'm excited to announce that this will be the debut of my first official review that's actually gaming related. The Sega Dreamcast. We start off with, of course, info about this system. In Japan, it released in October of 1998. I think it was the 26th, if I'm not mistaken. But in America, it released on, and I'm not joking here, September 9th, 1999. That was whenever I was 2 years old. Now please note, since I was that old at the time, I didn't even know about this thing. Now, you're probably thinking, so what's so special about this thing anyways? Also, sorry for the shaky camera, I think I'm just a little, no, I'm not chilly because the fan's off. I guess I'm just excited. Yeah, as I was saying, what's so special about it is, it was way ahead of its time. If you can look here, a certain console made by Nintendo would soon, wait, no, it was already out at that time. The Nintendo 64 wasn't the only system with the 4 controller input. Wait, no. Yeah. Sorry guys, I'm a little flustered right now, I'm just so excited. But yeah, the Dreamcast truly was ahead of its time. You're probably thinking, why is there a little tiny controller next to that big one? Well, we're gonna get to that in a bit. First of all, we need to know what all is so special about the Dreamcast. So right over there, I have my laptop ready to do laptop things. But how about we start off with something that is quite interesting. This was made back in the time when Sega was actually in the console business. Now, nowadays you'll see like Sega Genesis things made by AT Games or AT Games, whatever you want to call them. But those aren't made by Sega. This right here was Sega's last official release of a system. And I'm excited to report that almost 20 years later, sorry, I'm a little nervous. This really was a masterpiece. In fact, you could definitely say it was a dream come true. And yeah, there was a bad joke there, but it was worth it. Because the Sega Dreamcast right here really was ahead of its time. You're probably thinking, well, we see the control slots, but what about the memory card slot? This is where it gets really interesting. Remember that controller and the little device next to it? Well, as it turns out, that this little thing, even though it has little buttons to be played on, isn't just for show. It's actually the memory device, otherwise known as the VMU, or Visual Memory Unit. The Visual Memory Unit, hence the name, will show images based on what games you're playing. For example, Sonic Adventure or Quake 3 Arena, which, yes, this review will also cover those. Now, As we all know, back in the 90s and early 2000s, sorry about that, we didn't have the kind of technology that we have now covered by PS4, Xbox One, and of course the Nintendo Switch. So for that, we have the standard issue AC cable. Not AC as in air conditioning, it's just a power cable. And then we have the AV output cable. And of course, you'll need to know what kind of discs this takes. Because yes, Sega has made console-based systems in the past, but the Sega Saturn and of course the Sega Dreamcast were the only systems that Sega ever made that took discs. Now I know there's the Sega CD for the Sega Genesis, but that wasn't its own system. That was a hardware peripheral. Now another thing is, way back when, this was practically on top of the world back whenever it first came out. But of course, then we had the likes of Sony and their PlayStation 2 and the Xbox that were coming out. I almost said Xbox One, but that's nowadays. And of course, we had the Nintendo GameCube on the way as well. So, things wouldn't last long until the Sega Dreamcast found itself at the mercy of its competitors, and eventually, worldwide, on March 31st, 2001, the Sega Dreamcast would be discontinued. Now what's interesting is, from what I could gather, people actually still make games for this thing. So you're probably thinking, so is the thing completely dead? Well, not exactly. There's still online play from what I could gather. Of course, like I said just now, there's still games being developed by independent developers and stuff like that. But in terms of actual games in the library, made officially by companies both Sega and third party, there were a grand total of a whopping 636 games released for the Sega Dreamcast. Now, if you think about it nowadays, that wouldn't seem like a big thing, but back in the 90s and early 2000s, that was a big deal. And of course, I've got two of those 636 games, which are Sonic Adventure and Quake 3 Arena. Yeah, notice something weird about that controller? There's only one joystick. There's the joystick, D-pad, start buttons all the way down there, but I'm already acclimated to it. And of course we got the 4 buttons, and we got the shoulder buttons way there. Now, something else to note is the fact that this system's discs, they aren't like the GameCube discs. It's literally just, if I can show it. Yeah, it's literally that kind of disc. So for those wondering, no, it didn't take any kind of specific discs, at least from what I could gather. And, yeah. What's really crazy is, like I said, the Sega Dreamcast did in fact have online play. But there were also peripherals that you used for the Sega Dreamcast for games like Quake 3 Arena, which I don't have any of those extra peripherals. Whenever I got this system, it came standard with the controller, but I had to get the VMU separately. But Sonic Adventure is a very fantastic game, with the notable exception of the cat campaign, because that was a pain in the ass, believe me. And Quake 3 Arena, it's pretty fun, but the only thing that's holding it back from being one of my favorites, try playing it with that thing. But luckily, like I said, there were some other peripherals that you could buy for this thing. For example, the jump pack has modem support, mouse and keyboard yeah, there were actually a mouse and keyboard peripheral for this thing. So if you were playing a game like Quake 3 Arena, you could play with those rather than having to struggle with that. Because by default, like the default control scheme is using these to move around, this to aim, this to switch your weapons and look at leaderboards, and this of course to pause. Right trigger is to shoot, and the left trigger is to jump. That's a very convoluted scheme right there. And if I could show the back, there's where the modem cable is. Now, something to note, it's not the same as an Ethernet. Sorry if you can't tell right now because of the lighting, but yeah. This thing is slightly smaller in terms of port size from an Ethernet. This of course is where the AC cable is for power. That is for serial support, and that's for the AV cable for audio and video. Now I'm gonna not pause, but I'm gonna plug in my phone just to charge it up, because Lord knows that this is eating my battery. But what I'm gonna do is I'm just going to bring that over. No. So I'll do that right now. Anyways, as I was saying, sorry about the weird angle, but yeah, you're probably thinking, oh, well, you only had 2 games for that thing, how could you possibly have such good impressions of it? Well, it's not just that, it's the major amount of features that this thing had at the time, which some of them are actually still available. However, you can't buy this thing brand new, so the place I got it from, Founded Electronics, they had it there for $50, and of course I had to buy the VMU separately for $9, and the games had their own price tags of $15 for Sonic, and Quake was $14 respectively. It also came standard with the cables right here, and yeah. Now you're probably thinking, just how good was the Dreamcast? Well, to put it bluntly, it was quite impeccable. It was graphically one of the best things ever done at that time. Now again, in America it was released in '99. In Japan and other regions, I assume, it was released in '98. Late '98. Unintentional rhyme isn't intentional, but for the time, that was very revolutionary, because up until that point we had, you know, the Nintendo 64, and we had, you know, peripherals like the Sega 32X and all that stuff. But technically, this makes the Dreamcast the first 128-bit systems. Yeah, this thing existed before the likes of the Nintendo GameCube, PS2, and the Xbox, the original one, not the Xbox One or 360. Now you're probably thinking, well, since it came out first, did that mean it did very well? Well, that is a thinker, but it was a phenomenal system for the time, let me tell you that. But it wasn't very long until the likes of Sony, Microsoft, and of course Nintendo swooped in and took that victory right right out from underneath Sega's belt, with the Nintendo GameCube, Xbox, and PS2 respectively, showing that they were much more superior, but for the time, since those weren't around whenever this thing first came out, the Sega Dreamcast was on top. Nothing could touch it up until those things came out. I'm not saying they were bad systems. I used to have a PS2. I don't anymore. I recently traded it in over at that Planet Electronics place. I also had a Xbox 360 Elite that I traded in, and I had a couple games as well that I traded in. Grand total of $48. Good. But again, for the time, the Sega Dreamcast was one of the best systems that people have ever seen. With, of course, the ability for online play for games like Quake 3, and I think there was a Phantasy Star game, if I'm not mistaken. Or I might be thinking of that Nintendo GameCube one. But, yeah. With a large variety of games, again, at the time, 600 in excess of, that was considered quite the achievement, because if you think about it nowadays, that seems like a minuscule amount, but for the time, that was pretty big. But the system wouldn't last very long. Of course, we all know that it was released in 1999 here in the US, and elsewhere it was released in 98 in differing months, and I think some regions got it in later parts of 99, not like late, but later into the year than when it came out here. But yeah, it lasted literally like, let's see, it was released here in September of 1999, September 9th. Now if you think about it, it was discontinued in 2001 on March 31st, worldwide. There wasn't any sort of, oh, you guys get discontinued first and then this and then this. No, everywhere it was discontinued on that date. Taking into account that it was released here in September, that would mean that we had it for not even 3 years, apparently. You're probably thinking, well, was it a bad system? Of course not. It was a great system. But like I said before numerous times, it was because of the rise of the PS1, PS2, I mean. Because of the PS2 and 60... Why am I thinking of systems that were way older than that? The NGC, or GCN, as it's called here in the US territories for whatever reason. And of course the original Xbox, because they were more superior, which I'm not saying that that's a bad thing towards the Sega Genesis in terms of like, oh, that means it wasn't powerful, because that thing was excellent. But when those other three systems came out in the early 2000s, they beat it by not even a minuscule amount. It was quite the margin. But for the time being, the Sega Dreamcast, up until those three systems came out, you better believe that it was one damn fine system. Now, on to the reviews for Sonic Adventure and Quake 3 Arena. First up, Sonic Adventure. Overall, I thought the game was a fantastic game, again with the notable exception of the Big the Cat story mode. Why did they need to add that in the game? I'll get to what I'm talking about in a bit. First of all, we have the variety of gameplay. in the game there are technically 7 stories, but you're only able to play through 6 before having the 7th and final one unlocked. First up is Sonic, who has the longest story mode in the game. I mean, he is the hero, it's his game. He has a grand total of, let's see, there's Emerald Coast, there's, Windy Valley, I think. Yeah, I don't remember. I'll have to look this stuff up, but he had a lot of levels, I can tell you that. Now, the gameplay for him was, of course, very fluid, and it's fast-paced, seeing as how he is Sonic the Hedgehog. The title of the game is called not Sonic's Adventure, but Sonic Adventure. Which, by the way, during development, it was planned to be an RPG game, aptly named Sonic RPG, but the name was later dropped and was changed into a just adventure game. Now, unlike most Sonic games where it's linear in terms of like, oh, after this level you gotta do this next, you do have adventure fields, meaning that you could go to different places and go back to different levels to take on different challenges. And what's really cool is there are also upgrades for the characters that you can get. For example, there is the Lightspeed shoes for Sonic the Hedgehog, where after you get those, what it'll do is, in case you were near a trail of rings, you would first have to make Sonic do a spin dash, so it's like, and then Sonic's like, ready? And if you're near the trail of rings and you let go of the spin dash button, it would go like you would go at light speed and follow that trail of rings to wherever you're supposed to go. And it's useful in some situations in the game where you actually need to do that in case you want to get to another area that you wouldn't be able to go to if you hadn't done that. Next up, we have Tails' adventure. Now, his is a little different, seeing as how he has, I don't remember how many levels he had to go through, but what is really interesting is that, for one thing, Tails has the ability to fly. As we all know, in the previous Sonic games, he was able to fly for a limited amount of time before he got tired and had to go down. And of course, that's the same here. But what's really cool is, he also has upgrades. There's one called the Jet Shoes that allows him to fly faster. Like, to move faster, not to, like, fly up faster and stuff. And the other upgrade is the Rhythm Badge, which allows you, and I quote, and I say this literally, you can just hold down Tails' attack button, and instead of having to repeatedly press the button on the control, either it's B or X, I think, hold on. Yeah, B or X, but instead of having to press that repeatedly, which you couldn't do it like rapidly, like you had to like press it rhythmically, like dun 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 dun. You would actually get to hold it down, and he would have a continuous spinning attack, or tail spin attack, where it's like a, I don't know, like a Beyblade. But yeah, so his gameplay is pretty cool, but his action stages are different from Sonic's. See, Sonic, for the most part, is just you having to go to a capsule and releasing animals from said capsule, therefore finishing the level. And his end boss, spoiler alert, for those who haven't played this game, it is the Egg Viper, and let me just say that boss is a pain in the ass, because I must have tried it like 15 times, probably, until I actually beat it. Because even once you've downed the health gauge for Eggman, for the Egg Viper, he'll do this sort of like kamikaze thing where, like, the boss fight is as follows. There's two different platforms. You start off on one, and after hit one, or hit two or something, you'll have to go to another platform. After a little while, Eggman will say, "All systems full power," and he'll break one of the platforms that you were using, and you'll be stuck on one. And gradually he'll start to break segments of the platform off until there's nothing left and you die. But what'll happen is basically he'll start to have these little spinning platforms with spikes on them, so you'll have the time to jump and jump onto the platform so that whenever they get back to him, you could jump into Eggman's cockpit and cause damage. And eventually, after you down the health gauge to 0, he'll start spazzing me out of control, and the Egg Viper will go like crashing around. And then you'll hear a voice from Tikal. Yes, she's in this game. I think she's shown in this game for the first time in the Sonic franchises, or Sonic game series. She says, "Watch out, he's up to something." And he will literally go to wherever you are, so you'll have to dodge just in time. Now please note, I did say that he will gradually destroy segments of that platform that you're on. Meaning that if there's like one platform left by the time that you down the gauge, you'll die and you'll have to start that boss fight all over again. It's a difficult boss fight, but I got through it nonetheless. Of course, we have Tails, which his action stages are a little different. Instead of just a straightforward thing, you have to race a character to the end of the stage. Either Sonic or the last one is, Eggman. And after you beat him, there's the Egg Walker, I think is what the boss name is. It's considerably easier than Sonic's final boss for his story mode, where instead of, having to dodge stuff and all that, you still have to dodge stuff, but you're not on like two different platforms, you're just in a station square. And what you'll do is basically you will have to go underneath Eggman's Egg Walker, and you'll see that there will be glowing weak points on the ankles of the robot that he's in, the Egg Walker. What you're supposed to do is use the tail attack. It's highly recommended that you have the rhythm badge to have a continuous tail attack. And after that, the actual cockpit of the machine where Eggman is will fall down and you can damage him. Gradually, the boss fight will get harder with you having to dodge shockwaves that the robot stomps on. Or not on, but it'll release shockwaves whenever it stomps. And of course, after that, yeah. Then we have Knuckles the Echidna. Now, oh wait, no. Hold on. Was Sonic's final boss Chaos 6 or Egg Viper? I don't remember. But, Knuckles is different in that in this game and the sequel to this game, which is Sonic Adventure 2 / Adventure 2 Battle for those who have the GameCube copy or the Sonic Adventure 2 Battle DLC, his levels are treasure hunting, where you have to hunt for 3 pieces of the Master Emerald, because in the game, sorry about that, I just got a notification from the Walking Dead Hour World. Anyways, what you'll have to do is you'll have to rely on this little radar at the bottom that will beep whenever you're starting to get close. It'll show blue when you're starting to get close, but still far away. Ugh, sorry about that, I had to burp. But gradually it'll change from blue to green to yellow to faint red to dark red. And what'll happen is, depending on where you are, if it's dark red, then that means you're right on top of where you're gonna need to dig. Or, look for it. And of course, you're supposed to find all 3 pieces per level. And eventually, after all that, you're gonna have to fight Chaos 6, which I think is the final boss for Sonic's story as well. I'm not sure, I don't remember. But yeah, there's that. And then we have Amy Rose. Her thing was actually the shortest of the bunch, being only 3 levels. And of course, a boss fight against Zero, which is this robot that not pursues her, but pursues her throughout her story. Now, what you gotta do is, voice crack. The game literally has you go to a balloon at the end of the stage and jump on it to evade Zero. That's all you gotta do. Seems simple, right? Wrong! Now, Zero itself can be a little difficult at times to avoid, but what I found the most difficult was in Twinkle Park, which I think is the first level of Amy's story, if I'm not mistaken. Also, hold on. I'm gonna, first of all, stop having these voice cracks. Second of all, I'm gonna turn on the fan so that my phone doesn't have a dark screen all the fucking time. And I'm back. Now, there is a boss fight against Zero, and you're probably thinking, well, do you have to kill Zero in the levels? No. Anyways, I was going back to Twinkle Park. Now, Twinkle Park, there are these segments where you have to go through these rooms with mirrors in them. There was one room in particular where I thought the controls were messed up, but then it turns out that I was looking at the wrong mirror, because there's so many Amy's that they show in that little room that you don't know which one's real until you actually start, moving your control stick around. And you're just like, oh, wait, that's what it is. But it confused me to hell and back, but I got through that. And of course, the boss fight with Zero involves you having to hit the robot with Amy's hammer. And what'll happen is it'll get sent into an electric fence on the egg carrier, which is one of the adventure fields in the game. And after that, it'll get electrocuted. It'll, be sent forward a little bit, and this little weak point will pop out of its head, and you have to hit that, 3 times if I'm not mistaken. And after that, you defeat Zero and end Amy's story and beat her game. Then we have, oh god, I can't believe they put this in the game. Big the Cat. Yeah. You could probably tell by my voice that I wasn't too fond of that. Basically, instead of, action stuff, where you have to, I don't know, go to the end of a stage and beat up bad guys and stuff, you fucking fish. I'm not joking. You actually fish. What you're supposed to do as the main goal in each stage is, I can't believe I'm saying this, fish for Froggy. Because in Sonic, in Sonic's universe, Big the Cat has a little friend named Froggy, which is of course a frog, hence the name. And in the game, they swallow a Chaos Emerald and they grow a tail. I think they're also possessed by Chaos, which explains it. And I'm not joking, you have to fish for Froggy in order to catch him and beat each action stage. Words cannot describe how much frustration I had with this. First level took me probably 30 minutes or so. I'm about to explain you in great detail what you're supposed to do. You are supposed to painstakingly aim your fishing lure by holding down the attack button. You know, the button that you use for Sonic Spin Dash or Tails' tail spin or Knuckles' punch in the game. Yeah, he could punch. Amy's hammer attack. No, in Big the Cat story, you use that to fish. And granted, you could attack enemies, but apparently it's not very good because you have to be so close to the enemy that you'll literally get hurt and lose rings by the time you get hit. So you're better off aiming the fishing lure right where the enemy is, which is something that you can do, apparently. And you're supposed to painstakingly aim the fishing lure into the body of water that you're supposed to aim it into, near where Froggy is, and once they see the fishing lure, they will go towards it, and you're supposed to waggle the control stick a little bit in order for a hit word to appear on the screen that says hit, and you're supposed to reel in Froggy. But be careful because there is a tension gauge that if it fills up all the way, your line will break and apparently you lose a life. Someone explain to me how you lose an in-game life from your fishing line breaking if fishing poles have plenty of fishing line to go around. It's game logic. Don't question it. But yeah, there is an actual boss fight with Red. No. Red. Oh, that explains it. I'm looking up at my TV, and I remember that I looked up the Godzilla creepypasta. But no, you don't face Red. You face Chaos in this. And Godzilla's Red for the creepypasta. But of course, with Chaos 6, what you have to do is, they'll have a shockwave attack, and that's all. They'll jump up, release shockwaves that you'll have to jump over. But what you're supposed to do is, you might notice a red targeting reticle within Chaos. I almost said red again. A red reticle inside red, inside Chaos where Froggy is. You're supposed to aim for that and cast the fishing line into that to catch Froggy, and that's all. You don't have to do any reeling or anything. It's as soon as the fishing bobber thing hits Froggy in the boss fight, you win. Not sure why that's a boss battle or why Big the Cat was chosen as a story, but Sega, if you ever decide to make a third Sonic Adventure game, please, for the love of all that is holy, never do that again. In fact, I'm just gonna say this, a much better character that they could have used is Eggman. I know he's the villain, but it would have been kinda cool to play as him. Speaking of Eggman, the final story before the 7th and final one that you have to unlock is E-102 Gamma, which is one of Eggman's robots that during the events of his story basically turns to the light side and decides to fight against Eggman's robots because Amy actually convinced them that they don't have to follow Eggman's orders because she senses good in the robot after they released her and her bird from a jail cell aboard the egg carrier. Now, the action stages for E1 and 2 Gamma are a little different, because you'll notice that during his stages, the time on the top left corner of the screen isn't going up like 1, 2, 3. It's actually counting down, because in the game you have to destroy enemies to get back time on the clock, and you can actually change, no, not change, but sorry, I'm a little tired, and that thing's making me a little chilly. But what I was trying to say is you can actually do chain attacks where you can target multiple enemies at once and get them all to add even more time. And what you're supposed to do is make it to the end of the stage and do, certain things, like the first level is to destroy a Sonic doll. Glad it's not the Tails doll, because that's such a terrible creepypasta. If anyone's a fan of that creepypasta, I apologize, but it's cliched. The Godzilla creepypasta, though, that's awesome. It's not cliched. It's not hyper-realistic blood everywhere. It's very well done, and I'd highly recommend anyone should read it. Just try not to have nightmares, please. But, yeah, so then throughout the game you'll have to destroy the other E-series robots, or E100 series robots, like, Beta and stuff like that. I don't remember what all their names are. But, the final boss for, Gamma is not Chaos, but instead it is actually Zeta, I think is what the robot's name is. And it's a boss fight where you have to watch out for the robot enemy charging at you, and you have to dodge out of the way and then aim at their back and then shoot them there. And yeah, of course there are upgrades for him. There's upgrades for Big the Cat, Amy Rose, that you'll gradually get throughout the story. And of course there are upgrades for Knuckles, like fighting gloves that'll increase his attack power, and there is also digging claws that you can use to shovel claws that you can use to shovel into the ground and dig, which the controls for that are literally just holding down the A button and the action button at the same time. But you find out at the end of Omega's story that Gamma's story, I'm thinking of Sonic Heroes. Sonic Heroes, Sonic, yeah, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, yeah, so you find out at the ending of Gamma's story that he was once a bird himself, which is why, near the end of his story, you'll see Amy's bird fly up to it, and you'll see something on the TV, or whatever screen that you're using, showing 3 birds, a pink one, a white one, and a blue one, which is of course Amy's bird. Then of course Gamma actually self-destructs, and you might be thinking, that killed the bird, right? Nope, they're alive. And now for the final story, which is Supersonic. Also, my screen went back up, okay? But you're probably thinking, oh, well, it's probably going to be some big convoluted thing. Technically, it's still Sonic's story, but it counts as its own story because it continues from where Sonic's left off. So basically, you have to go to Station Square after doing some things, and, yeah. And you actually have to do one boss fight. Just one. And despite the fact that you're going to be supersonic, it can get pretty fucking hard. The boss fight is called Perfect Chaos, and what you gotta do is you have to make sure you have a good amount of speed whenever you're taking it on, because gradually throughout the fight it will attack you by shooting a beam out of its mouth, or shooting fireballs, either purple or orange, or spouting out whirlpools to slow you down. Should you slow down, you will not be able to attack them, and Chaos will simply teleport. Something else to note during the boss fight: your ring count will gradually lower. So the idea is to grab rings, be sure to have a good amount of speed to attack Chaos, and of course attack them. Attack them 3 times, and a second segment to the boss will begin. You're probably thinking, what happens when the ring count reaches 0? Sonic will then revert to regular Sonic from Super Sonic, and he will die, causing you a life. If you reached the second segment of that boss, it will not save over. You will literally have to start the boss from the very beginning. I found that out the hard way whenever my cousins were in here with me, and they were amazed at how hard the boss actually is. But in the end, I did beat it, therefore beating the game. Did I 100% it? No. Did I need to? No. There are some other features in the game, like the Chow Garden making its grand debut, like we would expect, because, as I said before, there's the VMU device for the Sega Dreamcast, which I think was a separate peripheral back in the day, but it's basically a little minigame memory card thing. But what's really cool is you can actually have that with you and have a Chow in there for Sonic Adventure, and as far as I'm aware, Sonic Adventure 2 also has that, and it's greatly expanded upon. Of course, I don't have Sonic Adventure 2, but I do plan on getting it at some point. Now, onto the Quake 3, review. I haven't played it through, because for one thing, the controls are just, I can't get used to them. You could customize the controls however you so please, but even still, it is, it's a great game, but just the control scheme they chose for the Dreamcast controller. I get why they did it, but it's not a good, control scheme. Now, again, let me explain to y'all what I mean by this. Like I said before, we have the ABXY buttons being used to move, and the C stick or control stick to aim. Look up, down, left, right, and all that stuff. Then we have the D-pad, where if you press left or right on the D-pad, it'll show the leaderboard. Pressing, I think, up or down on the D-pad will change your weapons. Then we have the right trigger, which is to shoot, which is normal. But then we have probably the weirdest choice for a jump button: the left trigger. Yeah. Of course, the start button's gonna be there to pause the game, of course. But what was really cool is this game actually had, online. I'm pretty sure that Sega's Dreamcast online services are still running, or at least people are still keeping it alive with programs for computers or something, or I think it's just still running, which is great because, the Sega Dreamcast, despite being discontinued, from what I've heard, the online stuff is still, online, because I have seen another YouTuber's review of the Sega Dreamcast port of Quake 3 Arena, and I saw that they were actually playing online with other people, so either they had a program running on their computer, which they used to, record and review the game, or the fact that Sega Dreamcast online services are still up and running, which either one sounds plausible, I assume. But aside from the weird control scheme, the game is very good. It has difficulty settings that you can choose from, of course. What's interesting is this port of the game was handled by Raster Productions, I think is what the company is called, who handled that port of the game. It's a very good port. It has a solid frame rate, not 60 FPS, but it's still a very good frame rate. It still looks very good. The only downside is the control scheme is still weird. Like the default one, which is what I was talking about earlier, it's not ideal. But sadly I haven't found the keyboard and mouse peripheral for the Dreamcast. Maybe one day if I do find them, maybe I will get them, and maybe my experience will change then. But until then, I'm going to give Quake Champions, Quake 3 Arena for the Dreamcast, and 8.1. Sonic Adventure, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna rate each and every one of these story modes. So first we have Sonic's, of course that's gonna be a 9.7. The only reason why it's getting a deduction is because there are some very difficult parts of the game, especially the Egg Viper boss. Tails, that gets a 9.8. The deductibles from that are, well, not really anything at all, except for the whole, you have to race this person to get to the next level or something, which is still a weird idea. Now, there were some moments whenever I was doing that with another character I had to race, and things got tense, but I still got through it. Yeah. And we have Knuckles. 10 out of 10, man. Knuckles' theme is the catchiest freaking song I have ever heard. It's sort of like a hip-hop / rap song about Knuckles. It is so fucking catchy. The levels that you do are different from the other action stages in that they aren't linear at all. All you gotta do is go around the playable area and search for the 3 pieces of the Master Emerald, and that's it. This is actually expanded upon in Sonic Adventure 2 to where you actually have to search for things other than the Master Emerald, and at the very end of the game, which I don't have Sonic Adventure 2. I used to on PS3, and I had Sonic Adventure 2 Battle on GameCube back in the day, but it stopped working, but I was at the end of the game anyways, but I didn't beat it. Trust me, that part of the game is actually really fucking hard. But his story mode was awesome. Amy's, I'm going to give that a 9, just a solid 9, because it's short. The boss fight really wasn't anything spectacular, it wasn't particularly difficult. The deductibles are, of course, that things can get really, really, like, intense when you're having to go through a level and you have to do a certain thing in that level and simultaneously try to evade Zero, which that can get really intense, especially on I think it's Hot Shelter, where you have to place these cubes into these little things that are the same color. The first one is okay. Second one, Zero will come up out of nowhere periodically, so you're supposed to evade them and do that at the same time. My recommendation is to knock Zero off the edge of the platform that you're on, so that way they won't get you for the time being. Then we have Big the Cat story. I'm not even gonna bother. It gets a 2 out of 10. Sega, you could have turned Big the Cat story into something better. Not just fish for a froggy. However, I will add, some bonus points because you gotta admit, the fact that John St. John voices Big the Cat is pretty fucking awesome. For those who don't know, John St. John was actually the voice actor for the legendary character Duke Nukem from the Duke Nukem 3D games onwards. Yeah. In fact, he actually had his voice lines re-recorded for the re-release of Duke Nukem 3D, Duke Nukem 3D 20th Anniversary World Tour. Yeah, so bonus points to that, but that just counts as 2.5. And yes, John St. John really is the only redeemable thing about, Big the Cat story mode. Sorry about the voice cracks, by the way. Then we have E-102 Gamma. One of the best, story modes I played. I give it a 9.8. You're probably thinking, well, hold on, why are you doing this kind of review format for, Sonic Adventure? It's because of the fact that each story mode for each character kind of feels like its own game, but it's not. However, I will have a overall review score after Gamma and Supersonic. Gamma's story mode, as I said before, consists of... There are a few boss fights sprinkled in. In fact, there are actually some boss fights at the end of stages that you had to do, but they aren't one of those, boss fight after a level, it's boss fight at the end of the level, which is just the other E100 series robots. But, like I said, Gamma's story has him go through levels and destroying enemies to add time back on his clock, which is counting down to before he self-destructs, which is kind of a tense thing. In fact, the final level of his thing, which I think is Hot Shelter, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that can get really tense, because I had like 40-something seconds on the clock by the time I finished that level. It's hard. And, the thing is, that level ends up with a boss fight where you have to destroy, like, this one robot with turrets around it, which you have to destroy the turrets and then it'll die. It's not one of those, destroy these turrets and then shoot something else and then it'll die. But, yeah, overall, Gamma's story was very good. Then we have Supersonic. 9.6. You're probably thinking, okay, well, what did they do wrong? Nothing really. I mean, it's a great ender to the game. The whole Sonic has to save the world from assured destruction. As tried Jimmy Neutron. Sonic did it better. Shut up. Anyways, so you're probably thinking, well, what's so interesting? Well, the thing is, Chaos, before the boss fight, actually absorbs the power of the Chaos Emeralds, but you later find out that he only absorbed the negative power of the Chaos Emeralds, through negative emotions like anger and sadness. But then the characters, they come up with the idea that, hey, you could still use the positive power of the emeralds to turn into Supersonic, and of course that works, and the great battle ensues. The boss battle itself was awesome. It's difficult, but it's doable. It's not impossible, it's pretty good. You just have to be very careful, you have to be precise with where you have to go. You have to be sure not to slow down one bit. You have to make sure to keep the ring count up. Because, like I said earlier, if the ring count reaches 0 while you're in Supersonic mode, you turn into regular Sonic and you lose a life. is very difficult, but it's not too difficult to the thing where it's like,
oh, fuck this game, it's way too hard.
So my overall score for Sonic Adventure 1, that would be a 9.4. It's a very solid game. I'd highly recommend it for those who are looking to get a Dreamcast and maybe a couple games for it. Yeah. As for the Dreamcast itself, for my overall review, the pros. Whenever I got it, it was $49 plus tax, of course, over at Fnatic Electronics. So it doesn't go for a super high price unless, of course, you go online for like eBay and stuff. And of course, we have the fact that its library of games, which you're probably thinking, oh, well, nowadays 636 ain't nothing. I'm focusing on its specific timeline. 636 way back when was considered a big deal. So it's got that. It was very innovative, and it was a very powerful system for the time. Again, this thing released in 1998 for some parts of the world, and in America it was released in 1999. For the time, it was it was literally the only 128-bit system for the time being. And then 2000 and 2001 came along, and the Sony PlayStation 2, the Microsoft Xbox, and the Nintendo GameCube came out, and those literally swept the floor compared to, the Sega Dreamcast. Sorry for the shaking, I'm starting to get a little chilly because of, Senor chills a lot. But, yeah, so it was a very powerful system for its time. Very innovative, especially with the VMU and the fact that it had built-in online, which at the time it was very, very unique because the Sega Saturn, its predecessor, was planned to have that, but it was later scrapped. The Nintendo 64, which was actually out at the time, it technically had online, but it was only in Japan through the use of the 64DD, and I think it was a certain cartridge or something. I think there was also the PS1 Net Eurose. I've never seen one. I've heard about it. It's where you can make your own games and stuff. But, yeah, for the time being, the Sega Dreamcast was way ahead of its time. That's not a negative thing. The controller, even though it seems chunky, is actually very comfortable. I do like that. I like the ergonomics, although it's a little weird. But the thing is, the moment I first started using it, I was already used to it. Now, there is only one negative thing about the system. Just one. And that would be the longevity. Now, yes, in Sega's defense, they weren't able to keep up financially with how the Sega Dreamcast was starting to fail now that the PlayStation 2, the Xbox, and the Nintendo GameCube were out. But had they been more financially stable, I felt that they could have, elongated the lifetime of the Sega Dreamcast. So, what I'm trying to say is that's the only slight negative, but it's not a negative score. It's just a small thing that I really wish they could have tried to do, but they just didn't have the power to. My overall score is, and you're probably going to be really surprised, the Sega Dreamcast, for not only blowing my mind after I did so much research into it, although I forgot some stuff, And the fact that it right now goes for a very good price. It had a very wealthy library of games, again, for the time. And again, like I said, there are people that are making games for it, like independent developers and stuff. Overall, the score for the Sega Dreamcast is a 10 out of 10. It's a dream come true in my eyes. Pun slightly intended. It was Sega's last hurrah, and it was a true masterpiece. Sega, if you ever see this stream / review and stuff, I want you to know this. Should you ever go back into the console business, like for real, not having other people make consoles for you, except for like maybe console design concepts and stuff, maybe you can in fact make a direct successor to the Dreamcast. Because believe me when I say this, the Sega Dreamcast was an amazing system. It was, again, ahead of its time. It was very innovative. It had a very wealthy library of games. And, yeah. Now, something I should mention about the whole 636 games thing. That's officially how many games it had. Total. And I'm talking about including games from other territories like Japan and Europe and stuff. That's how many games it had total. How many games it had in North America, like the US, I don't know. I wish I could know, but I didn't check. I will check at some point, and I'll let y'all know at a later point in time. But until then, this is the end of the stream. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I hope you guys have enjoyed this 10,000 views, celebration. Like, this really did catch me by surprise, because a while ago I checked on Google, because a friend of mine was curious about how many views I have on my channel. Yeah. In fact, if you want an exact number of how many views I have, last time I checked, it was 10,554. That's a lot. And I only have 154 subs. Thank you all very, very much for the continued support. It really means a lot to me. I know my face doesn't show it. I'm not crying, by the way. I just have like something in my nose. But I will say that I am very thankful to have such loving viewers like you guys for, checking out my stuff, letting your friends know about the channel, like I've said in the ends of my streams, and, seeing new things that you probably wouldn't have known until I told y'all, or until someone else told y'all. But this review right here, I've been thinking about doing this for a long, long time. But it wasn't until now that I see that I have 10,000 views, that I decided to do it. Because again, I've been planning this review for a long time. I even researched what I could for the Dreamcast leading up to this point. So, from the bottom of my heart, I would like to thank you guys dearly for, again, the continued support. I've been streaming for 2 years now. I started in 2016 on June 5th, 15th, because I was gone on June 5th. Yeah. Of course, I did my 1-year anniversary stream last year. I wasn't able to do one this year because I think I was just busy at that time. But this is to make up for all that. So, with me ending the stream right now, I just want to say thank you all very much for 10,000 views, and I do sincerely hope that this channel will continue to grow, and maybe we can do new things as time progresses. But anyways, with all that being said, I love you all very much. I hope you guys have enjoyed this stream, although I didn't see anyone pop in, sadly, but I guess people are asleep at this time. Anyways, if you did enjoy this stream, then please like, comment, and subscribe, as well as turn on notifications and let your friends know all about this channel, so that way they could check out stuff like this. With all that being said, I love you all very much. Again, thank you all very much for all the views. Now again, I'm not monetized, but this really does help me. It shows that even a small person like me on YouTube can have quite a good audience. With all that being said, I love you all very much. Thank you for watching if you plan on watching this after it's done. And as always, keep on rocking.